Hey everyone, welcome back to The Explainer. So today, we're mapping out literally one of the most crucial delivery systems in the entire human body. If you've ever found yourself wanting to truly understand the arteries of the head and neck, well, you're in exactly the right place. We're going to break down this massive, complex network so you can finally build a perfect mental map of exactly how blood travels from your heart all the way up to your head. But before we actually trace these pathways, just think about this for a second. Your brain constantly demands this massive, uninterrupted volume of oxygen-rich blood, right? So how exactly does it get all that blood at such high pressure without those delicate little vessels inside just bursting? Well, the secret is in this incredibly specialized delivery network and the super precise sensors that keep our heads functioning. It's fascinating. So let's dive right in and see how it all works. Okay, so think of your circulatory system like a massive, bustling highway network. Your heart is the central pumping station, obviously. And to get blood all the way up to the head and neck, it relies on three major supply routes, or, main highways. As you can see, we've got the carotid arteries, the vertebral arteries, and then branching off the subclavian arteries down below, we have the thyrocervical trunks. We're going to explore every single one of these three systems today. Now, what's honestly wild here is just how asymmetrical human anatomy can be. Let's look at where the common carotid arteries actually begin, because they don't start the exact same way on both sides. No way. On the right side, the right common carotid only pops up after the brachiocephalic trunk divides into two, with the other branch being the right subclavian artery. But on the left common carotid branches straight off the aortic arch itself. Because of that direct line, the left common carotid is usually a bit longer than the right. And clinically speaking, this direct path is a huge deal because it means clots traveling from the heart are actually way more likely to shoot straight up that left side right into the brain. So once they leave the thoracic cavity, both of these common carotid arteries travel safely up through the neck. But notice how they aren't traveling alone. Not at all. They're safely tucked inside this protective wrapping called the carotid sheath, and they're riding right alongside two other absolutely crucial structures. You've got the internal jugular vein sitting just lateral to the artery, and the vagus nerve, which you might know as cranial nerve 10, running posterior to both of them. Together, this vital bundle travels up laterally, right past your trachea and esophagus. And because these major vessels are literally bundled so tightly together in the neck, any severe trauma to the side of the neck is for sure a massive medical emergency.
All right, here's where it gets really interesting. As the common carotid hits the upper edge of the thyroid cartilage, it splits into two. But right there at the fork, the artery actually bulges out a little bit. That's the carotid sinus, sometimes called the carotid bulb. And it is absolutely packed with baroreceptors. These act like pressure sensors that detect changes in your blood pressure and help regulate it. Fun fact, this is exactly why doctors will sometimes massage the neck to treat a super rapid heart rate. They're actively stimulating that carotid sinus. And sitting right next door is the carotid body, this little oval-shaped arterial chemoreceptor. It acts like a chemical quality control center, constantly monitoring the oxygen, carbon dioxide, and pH levels in your blood to make absolutely sure the flow to your brain is perfectly optimized.
Okay, moving right along to section 1, the external carotid network, or what I like to call the local roads.
So, right after that split we just talked about, we get the internal carotid, which shoots straight up to the brain, and the external carotid. For a minute here, let's just focus entirely on the external carotid. If the internal carotid is the non-stop express route, the external network is the system of local roads. It branches off to specifically supply the face, the scalp, and the outer structures of the neck. And to make this kind of complex network super simple, we can group its 6 side branches into 3 easy directional categories based on where they start. We've got the anterior group, the medial group, and the posterior group. Trust me, building this simple mental map right now is going to make remembering these branches so much easier down the road. Just follow that main red vessel going up, and you're tracing the external carotid artery. Notice how it travels up through the neck, tucking right behind the lower jaw and just in front of the ear. Along that journey, it actually crosses behind the digastric and stylohyoid muscles, and that's exactly where it gives off those anterior, medial, and posterior branches we literally just categorized. Eventually, the whole thing terminates right inside the tissue of the parotid gland. Let's take a closer look at a few of the most important local roads peeling off this main route. First up, from our anterior group, we have the superior thyroid artery. It pops off the front of the external carotid and instantly arches downward. Its main gig is acting as the primary delivery route for the thyroid gland itself, though it also feeds the infrahyoid muscles and the upper parts of the larynx.
And clinically, this is huge. Because it directly feeds the thyroid, surgeons have to carefully identify and tie off this exact artery during thyroid removals to prevent any major bleeding.
Moving just a little bit higher up on that anterior side, we run into the lingual artery. If you trace its path, you'll see it loops forward and slightly downward at first, traveling deep to the hyoglossus muscle. And, well, just like the name suggests, this artery's absolutely crucial job is supplying blood to all the intrinsic and extrinsic muscles of your tongue. Eventually, the external carotid reaches the end of the line and splits into two terminal branches. One of those is the superficial temporal artery. You can see it passing upwards right near the outer ear and crossing over the temporal bone. And what's really cool and highly practical about this specific branch is that because it's so close to the surface, it's totally palpable, meaning you can literally take your fingers right now, press them just in front of your ear, and feel your own pulse throbbing right there. Pretty neat, right?
All right, moving on to section 2, supplying the brain, specifically looking at the vertebral route. So, now that we've cruised the local roads of the external carotid, let's switch gears and focus on the vertebral artery. Your brain literally requires its own dedicated express routes that completely bypass the face to directly feed the central nervous system. Now, this part is often misunderstood, but the anatomy is just so fascinating. The vertebral artery doesn't just, travel up the soft tissue of the neck like the others. Instead, it starts down at the subclavian artery and then physically threads its way up through these tiny bony holes called transverse foramina right inside your cervical vertebrae. It's literally weaving safely through these bony rings, totally armored by your spine, all the way to the brain. But because they travel directly through the spine like that, sudden violent neck snaps, like what happens in whiplash, can actually stretch or injure these super delicate vessels. Once those two vertebral arteries, one coming up the left, one coming up the right, finally enter the base of the skull, they do something incredibly beautiful. They actually merge together. Right there at the pontomedullary junction, they combine to form a single, massive blood vessel known as the basilar artery. This huge artery rests flat against the front surface of the brainstem, acting like a giant central distribution hub for the brain. Clinically speaking, a stroke in this massive basilar artery is absolutely catastrophic. It often results in what's known as locked-in syndrome, where a patient is completely awake and aware, but entirely paralyzed. Okay, let's wrap up with section 3, the thyrocervical trunk. So we've seen the massive carotid highways and the armored vertebral express routes. Finally, let's look at our third vital support network. The thyrocervical trunk is kind of like a short little driveway that almost immediately splits off into 4 main paths. You've got the inferior thyroid artery, the ascending cervical artery, the transverse cervical artery, and the suprascapular artery. Its whole job is to supply blood to crucial neck muscles, the shoulder region, and even parts of your spinal cord. So let's take a really quick look at exactly where these 4 paths go. Looking closer here, the largest branch of this trunk is the inferior thyroid artery. It arches up and actually tucks right behind the carotid sheath to feed the lower portions of the thyroid gland, plus the trachea and the esophagus. And often branching off right next to it is the ascending cervical artery, traveling straight vertically up the neck. This one is small but mighty. It gives off tiny spinal branches that pass right into the vertebral canal to supply the spinal cord and its protective layers, the meninges. Next up, we have the transverse cervical artery. If you follow its path, you'll see how it weaves toward the back, literally passing right through the brachial plexus to reach the back of the neck and your shoulders. It acts as the dedicated supply line for your superficial back and neck muscles, splitting into branches that feed heavy lifters like the trapezius and the levator scapulae. And finally, wrapping up this trunk, we have the suprascapular artery. Notice how this vessel takes a really unique outward path. It travels laterally out to the side to supply the muscles of the posterior shoulder blade, specifically feeding the supraspinatus and infraspinatus muscles resting right there in the grooves of the scapula. So, here's the absolute crucial point to take away. Understanding the blood supply to the head and neck really doesn't have to be overwhelming at all, as long as you break it down into these 3 core systems. Number 1, you've got the carotid highways, splitting into those external local roads for your face and internal express routes for the brain. Number 2, the vertebral express routes, safely threaded right through your cervical spine. And number 3, that thyrocervical support network, feeding your vital neck muscles and spinal structures from underneath.
As we wrap up, I just want to leave you with this thought. Think about that carotid sinus instantly adjusting to your blood pressure, or those vertebral arteries heavily encased in solid bone. Without these super precise sensors and these overlapping, redundant supply networks, how would our brains possibly survive even basic stuff like sudden changes in posture, or shifts in our environment, or even minor bumps and injuries? It really is just an absolute marvel of anatomical engineering.
I really hope this visual breakdown helped totally clarify the arteries of the head and neck for you today. Quick question of the day for you. Which of those three main blood highways did you find the most surprising? Let me know in the comments below. And hey, if you found this explainer helpful and you want to keep mastering anatomy with clear, structured breakdowns, make sure to hit subscribe for more simple medical explanations. Keep learning, keep mapping it all out, and I'll catch you in the next explainer.